So at this hour, we're going to be looking at the initiation season in the Western Cape. We'll speak to the MEC in just a moment, but one of the big stories that is currently taking place in the Eastern Cape is around the suspension or the disciplinary actions that would have been taken against some of the officials when it comes to, you remember, the holding of equitable share when it comes to, the decision by Treasury. But another big story is taking place across the country. You just saw what we just spoke to Kholeka about, and that is the issue of the initiation season in the province of Limpopo. But now, when you look at what has currently taken place, there's a lot to talk about as far as that initiation season is concerned. So in a short moment, we'll speak to the MEC. But another story is also of grave concern. It is around what the public protector has been speaking about today. When it comes to that story, you'd remember just a step back in time, the children who died in Soweto when it comes to just consuming snacks. At the time, they wanted to get a sense as to what can they link their deaths to when it comes to the snacks that were consumed. We know what the investigations have found in that particular story. But when you think about what the public protector had to say today, it is still a grave concern. This particular probe was launched by the public protector following that particular investigation by the African Transformation Movement, and that is Vuyelwe Zungula, who started laying a complaint with the public protector. So over 20 children, you'd remember, from the case of 3 at the time, dying in 2024. Most of the victims, we understand, were between the ages of 8 and 10. Toxic pesticide found in the snacks, and that toxic pesticide, also known as organophosphate, we also got to know that in Gauteng, food safety then was scrutinized in that particular time. And so a lot of then focused on that issue, especially when you think about the licensing, right, of Spaza shops, especially here. This is where the big focus would have been, given the fact that how many Spaza shops were in fact licensed at the time. We even had a conversation here on the show with the Minister of Cooperative Governance at the time, telling us about this initiative now to try and make sure that these Spaza shops in fact are also registered. Also at the same time, you're looking at this particular issue here, and this issue of the critical shortage of inspectors was one of those issues that was spoken of as an issue of serious concern, because you do have inspectors, but those inspectors are then overloaded with the workload. And then at the same time, weak oversight is also what the public protector has found here. And then at the same time, you think about this particular concern. This is the food poisoning risk that is persisting. So if we still have this food poisoning risk persisting, what does it mean then about the issue of compliance? Because ultimately, then it simply means that we may find ourselves with this particular issue, becoming of grave concern again as a country. Now, there is the issue of, proposed action. Where to from here? What do we begin to do in order to try and address this particular matter? How do you then begin to boost inspections? We've heard from the Department of Labour that it's now adding on inspectors, but that was, of course, to try and boost some of the work that they are doing. And this was, of course, linked to the compliance when it comes to the migration challenge and some of the establishments there. So now what happens here when it comes to this particular compliance as far as the department is concerned? And then also at the same time, you need to then improve the issue of coordination. So how do you begin to improve the issue of coordination? How do you ensure, especially when it comes to, the different companies here, that they are working together? Because here in lies the coordinated effort in order to make sure that all government departments are in fact working together. A probe into the evasion of tax. This we're going to be speaking about. It is quite important, especially because there is allegations of fronting here, that a Spaza shop will be owned by a specific individual according to the records of government, but then a different person is then operating that particular Spaza shop. So what then do you do when it comes to this issue, and how do you also begin to circle back to improving coordination for all these departments that also must make sure that they do strengthen the enforcement as far as this particular issue is concerned? So there's a lot of focus on this particular story tonight, because you think about the that particular story when it began to emerge, we started to hear it from different townships across the country. But also then at the same time, we then get to now hear about the issues of compliance and where the lacks are as far as compliance is concerned. It really just raises a serious concern as to what then do we begin to address as a country. So let's stay with this particular story, in fact, and also just make sure that we try to get a sense and go behind this particular investigation by the public protector in order to understand exactly what happened here from an investigative perspective as to what work then went into what happened here, especially when you think about the fact that as the public protector, what then would they have done? We now speak to someone who was leading this particular investigation, the Gauteng provincial rep and project lead of the investigation, Vusumuzi Dlamini. Good evening to you, sir, and thank you so much for your time. We've just gone through some of what was found, and we'll talk about that in greater detail in just a moment. But perhaps we'll start with this particular complaint. It has now been launched before yourselves. It's 2024. You now have to start with the work. Where did you begin as the investigator?
Good evening, Bongi, and good evening to your viewers at home. And thank you for the opportunity to explain our preliminary findings in respect of this systemic investigation, of course, into allegations of inadequate enforcement of prescripts regulating food safety and food hygiene within informal business sector, especially Spaza shops in the country. Of course, the complaint was lodged by a member of parliament, Mr. Vusumuzi, in 2024, October, following the spike in the cases of food-related illnesses, including hospitalization and death in some instances. And he called upon the public protector to exercise a constitutional mandate to ensure accountability and check whether our government, constituted at all levels, have adequate mechanisms in place to ensure that the people of South Africa are indeed safe from consuming unsafe foodstuff. When we started this investigation, obviously we had to first identify who has a legal obligation in terms of the law to ensure food safety, and of course, the local government, which is the municipality. They bear the primary responsibility of enforcing food safety in the country. They are empowered by the Constitution to employ inspectors, to be specific, environmental health practitioners who then must ensure that there is compliance by food retailers, Spaza shops, and any other food preparing premises to ensure compliance with the food hygiene, to ensure compliance with the licenses, the permits,
Mr. Dlamini,
and so on. Yes.
Pardon me for coming in there. I want you to stay with this issue of compliance, right? When it comes to permits and licenses is concerned, we're seeing, what appears to be suspected cases of corruption, business fronting, fraud, and tax evasion within this particular industry. Perhaps you tell us how bad it is and what exactly were you able to find here?
Yeah, and it's quite bad, Bonge, because through our investigation and through interaction with other stakeholders, and in this instance, the Department of Small Business Development, through its agency, which is a Small Enterprise Development and Finance Agency, they have been able to find possible cases of business fronting, fraud, as well as corruption. And that is through the applications that are brought in by the owners of small businesses such as Spaza shops to access the fund from government, the funding through the Spaza Shop Support Fund, which is sometimes either financial support or non-financial support in the form of inventory or in the form of funding itself. So when they verified some of these applications throughout all 9 provinces in the country, they were able to establish about 121 verifiable cases of possible corruption and business fronting involving the Spaza Shop Support Fund. These suspected cases of business fronting as well as corruption or fraud relate to instances where when they will visit the actual premises of the Spaza shop, they will find that there is a mismatch between the applicant and the person who's operating the Spaza shop. Or in some instances, they will even find that there is no shop at all, as opposed to what is contained in the application. And because of that particular finding, we have made appropriate recommendations that the Department of Small Business Development must start consultation with the SAPS as well as the BBBE Commission with a view to look further into these particular suspected cases of corruption, fraud, and thank you.
And especially because, as you say, this is quite concerning. It's fraud. I mean, if you're going to say that you have a Spaza shop and then there is no establishment, it boggles the mind as to, you know, what exactly is going on here. So from the work you've done, what is allowing this to thrive? Because when I was reading some of what the public protector had to say, it was that it seems that there may be ineffective systems when it comes to enforcement, but also instructors who are overly burdened. And I wonder then, when we talk about ineffective enforcement systems, what are we saying?
Firstly, on the issue of the suspected cases of business fronting, I want to first indicate that one of the enablers of that particular situation, you find that it's local citizens, because in some instances, they are the ones that will apply and be the people who are issued with licenses to operate the businesses. But when you visit the site, you find that it's not a South African who's actually operating that business. So in a way, you find that there is an aiding as well as an abetting by the local citizens, enabling people who are not supposed to be running this Spaza shop, enabling people who, in terms of which the certificate of acceptability are not issued in their names. But also, you will also find that because there isn't enough human resources, these municipalities are not properly staffed in line with the World Health Organization in terms of the employment figures of the environmental health officers, which requires that for a population of every 10,000, there must be one EHP. Because of those limitations and shortages, these premises are not visited in the manner that is envisaged or contemplated by the law, which requires that one premises must be visited at least 4 times in a year. And you will appreciate that due to lack of capacity, then there will be these operational challenges to the effect that some of the retailers will then get away with the matter.
Yeah. As a final one, then, what happens now? Because I suppose the big question is, you know, there is this preliminary investigation, and we're seeing what you have now managed to find so far and what has been recommended. So where to from here?
We have made certain recommendations as well as remedial action to various authorities, including, of course, the Premier of Gauteng, whom we have made recommendations that he must assemble a technical committee constituted of various other role players who must then assess the situation and start looking at all these issues contributing to a poor enforcement of legal prescripts regulating food safety in the country, looking at issues of funding, because we have also found that this important service, which is a municipal health service, is poorly funded. There isn't even a dedicated a ring-fence budget for it. It is instead funded from equitable share, which municipalities in some instances have power to just decide through their council to vote for that money to do something else, including maybe provision of basic services, and as a result, this important health function suffers. So through that technical committee, we have recommended that the Premier, working together with other relevant players within the public service, they should be able to then find a working solution to all these operational challenges that we have flagged in this report and the systemic shortcomings, as well as governance failures that we have flagged. There are also recommendations to the National Commissioner of the Police, the National Commissioner for South African Revenue Services, and the Commissioner for BBBE Commission to also work together with the Department of Small Business and Development to try and find ways of dealing with those flagged or verified cases of possible corruption as well as fraud within the Spaza shop industry.
Yeah, and let's see then, because the next stop becomes these particular entities to see what are they going to do with what you have just told them. But thank you so much for just talking to us and taking us behind the scenes of, you know, the work that you've had to do here with the team and to give us a sense of what was uncovered. Appreciate your time. Public Protector, SA Gauteng Provincial Representative and Project Lead of the investigation. That's Vusumuzi Dlamini.